The débat. The honourable member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's an honour this afternoon to speak to the fall economic statement. I have to say, me, along with many Canadians, are deeply disappointed in the fall economic statement because it was an opportunity to really provide real leadership to Canadians, to give relief to small businesses in this country, and to take action to address the rising costs that we're seeing coast to coast to coast. It seems that the Deputy Prime Minister has forgotten that we're in the worst cost of living crisis that we've seen in a generation. Inflation, as we've talked about for months in the House, is at a 40-year high. Gas prices are still at record levels, especially diesel. Housing is more expensive than it has ever been. And where did this crisis start? Well, this time, the Liberals can't blame a person by the name of Stephen Harper. They've had 7 years to correct this. They want to blame global economic conditions, and sure, maybe that had a little bit to do with it. But what is the real root of the inflationary crisis that we find ourselves in today? What has made everything worse in this country? The Liberals know, but they don't want to say. They know that the crisis has been caused by the years of massive, out-of-control Liberal deficit spending. The Liberals, when they came to power, and I was here in 2015, we left them with a balanced budget and a very good economic forecast. It was left to them by the responsible government of the Conservatives. They simply, in 7 years, squandered it. I get it. The Prime Minister couldn't help himself. His agenda was failing, so he needed to try and buy votes every which way they could think of. But now, Madam Speaker, the chickens have come home to roost. In fact, the price of chicken, by the way, has gone up double since these guys took office in 2015. So all that spending that they've done the last 7 years has driven inflation to the 40-year high. Canadians, coast to coast, are struggling mightily. Canadians are having to choose now, today, between filling up their cars with gas, putting food on the table, or even heating their homes. A paycheck today doesn't go as far as it used to. Liberal inflation combined with Liberal tax hikes means that Canadians need to do more with less. So what does the government propose? Clearly to make everything worse in this country. This economic statement introduces another $20 billion of inflationary spending to drive inflation up even higher. It also includes hikes to the EI premiums next month, to CPP, taking more money off everybody's paycheck. Instead of stopping their tax hikes, the Liberals are pushing forward with their plan to push the carbon tax in 2023. That's right, in the dead of winter, the Liberals are going to be raising the cost of fuel in the house for heating in your homes, along with groceries and the gas. Food bank usage, as we all know, is already an all-time high in this country, 35% increase in the last year. In my city alone, Saskatoon, population about 250,000, do you know 20,000 people a month visit the food bank? This used to be the economic engine of Canada, the city of Saskatoon. The executive director, Laurie O'Connor, admits the numbers that she sees through her door every day are very concerning. The donations now of food through the door and purchasing power has significantly decreased because food is so expensive. It's going to only get worse. Yesterday, you may recall, the 13th edition of Canada's Food Price Report said a family of four will see their food bill go up by over $1,000, which will reach about $16,000 a year. Now, according to Stuart Smith, he's from the University of Saskatchewan. He helped out in this report yesterday that was released. He said a family of 6 will pay over $21,000 in 2023 just for food. The problems is right in front of the Liberals, face it in front of their face, and they simply have ignored it. In Saskatchewan, I'm going to tell you, the temperature today hit between 30 and 40 below. It's early December. Today, 30 to 40 below. People of my province today are trying to figure out what temperature they can afford to set their thermostat to. Think about it. In the last week in Saskatchewan, 30 to 40 below already. We're not even at January temperatures. I want to know what the Prime Minister would say to the families who are already struggling to put food on the table when they see their last few dollars that they have going being used up when they move the thermostat up. The Prime Minister and this Liberal government has failed those families. They have failed retirees and the people living on disability that today are on a fixed income. So what should the government be doing today? First, without question, they should cancel all planned tax hikes and stop any government-mandated increases to the cost of living. No hikes at all to payroll taxes, no tripling of the carbon tax. Canadians simply can't afford any more of this Liberal tax increase. Second, they need to stop creating new inflationary spending. We know the government spending is only going to make inflation worse. If a minister wants to spend more money, they should need to find the equivalent savings in their budgets. Even the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned it a little bit in the fall economic report. But let me say this, while she did mention it, guess what? They gave the CBC additional $42 million over 2 years. Why? Because they had a tough time during the pandemic. This is the type of spending that has got to stop in this country. Hear, hear. The CBC, the public broadcaster, already gets between 1.2, 1.3 to 1.5 billion, and then you give them an additional 42 million over 2 years. Plus, we found out today, they are going to be at the trough when Bill C-18 gets cleared through the House. They'll be one of the biggest beneficiaries from Google and Facebook when that bill passes through the House. The public broadcaster. You know, when the Prime Minister was first elected, he promised his deficits, as we all recall, they're not going to exceed 10 billion, and that he would balance the budget by 2019. We all know that was a farce. Madam Speaker, the pandemic is not the only thing to blame here. 40% of the government's new spending measures have had nothing to do in the last 2 years with COVID. Since coming to power, the Prime Minister has introduced $205 billion in new inflationary spending that had nothing to do with COVID. I just mentioned one before with the public broadcaster. The cost of the interest payments on the federal government's debt has doubled. So the payments are nearly as high as the cost that we have in the health transfers to the province. Imagine what could be done today if that money could be directed elsewhere. Instead, due to this Liberal mismanagement, we have interest rates that are increasing faster than they have in decades. In fact, Madam Speaker, we expect another 50 basis points tomorrow by the Federal Bank of Canada. Mortgage payments, as we all know, are going sky high. So anyone who bought a house a few years ago had to renew their mortgage, could pay up to $7,000 more a year. Many Canadians can't afford that. Some, unfortunately, are losing their homes. While the Liberals are focused on making the problem worse, Conservatives, well, we're going to propose some solutions for Canadians. Instead of printing more money, a Conservative government will create more of what money buys. We'll get more homes built and make Canada the quickest place in the world to get a building permit. Young Canadians who have never been able to afford a home to start a family under the Liberals will find it more competitive and more affordable market under our Conservative government. Conservative government will make energy more affordable, will repeal the anti-energy laws and axe the carbon tax. We won't punish Canadians for heating their homes or simply driving their kids to activities if they can even afford those activities in 2023. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for that intervention this afternoon. I particularly enjoy every time he speaks in the House, more so for the tone rather than the content. But I'd like to ask him about something that I know is celebrated in my community as far as the economic statement, and it was about the removing of the federal portion of interest on student loans. So I'm just wondering if you could speak about what kind of a powerful impact that could have on students in his riding. Thank you.
The honourable member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Well, no doubt. I want to thank the honourable member. No doubt, if you don't have to pay the interest, if we can defer the interest payments for I don't know how many years, that would obviously help the students of today going to school. But at the same time, who's paying the interest payments on those? It's going to be Canadians. It was a good gesture, I will say that. It was a good gesture to help the university students, and not only university students, those going to college that are taking part in trades that we have in this country. It was a good gesture. I don't know how long we can go, but because of their spending, Madam Speaker, we're seeing interest rates rise almost every 2-3 weeks in this country because of the money that they are spending.
The honourable member, l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to have my colleague's opinion on something. The Bloc put forward 3 elements. What we wanted to see in this bill: employment insurance, help for seniors, and, well, 65 years and over. That's what we mean by seniors. And we also would like to see an increase in health transfers. For us in the Bloc, this is part of our DNA. This is part of our requests, and this has been part of our requests for years. Does my colleague agree with these 3 priorities? Would he support these 3 priorities as proposed by the Bloc Québécois?
Grasswood.
I want to thank the honourable member for his questions. Yes, I mean, healthcare is essential in this country, but we have seen coming out of the pandemic there is excruciating pain in every hospital in this country. Coming out of the pandemic was not easy for every hospital in this country, every province, in fact. We're fighting the shortage of doctors and nurses. It would be nice if we could, take out of the air an extra 100 doctors and put them in the city of Saskatoon, but that's just not possible. But we'll see where it's going to go, Madam Speaker. It's an interesting time coming out of the pandemic, and with the Liberal spending, it's going to be tougher to get out of it because of the interest rates that we're going to see in the next little while.
Questions and comments? Gentleman for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I didn't hear the honourable member in his speech talk about the increasing cost of housing and how difficult it is for people to be able to afford that. Ultimately, here on this House, we believe that housing is a human right. And that the financialization of the market through things like real estate trusts and investment trusts are part of that problem. Could you talk about that? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Well, I'm fairly confident in the province of Saskatchewan. We have really moderate housing as compared to everybody else in the country. I feel for those that are starting out, that are living in Vancouver and Toronto, the GTA area, it is without question near impossible to start under $700,000-800,000. Where in my city, in my province, that gets you a pretty good house these days. Canadians want to save for housing. They really do. It's going to take a little time. And I'm really disturbed with the interest rates. I lived when it was 12 to 18% in the 70s and 80s. It was hard. The younger folk, if I can say this, they have never seen 12 to 18% interest rates. Get used to it, because the way this government is spending, we're getting there faster than ever before.